So I think I will revert back to the period of establishing Sikh Empire, right? And when we talk about Sikh Empire, we talk about Banda Singh Bahadur, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and correct me if I'm wrong. Why is it that we don't talk about women who have also contributed to the creation of Sikh Empire? Like, why there are like less women who did that, while the establishment of Sikhi from Guru Nanak Dev Ji's perspective was that men and women, they both are treated equally.
Yeah.
Am I saying something wrong in here, or
No,
is
I think it's a really valid question. And actually, it's one of the reasons why when I read the House of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and I read about Rani Sadakaur, for example, I was blown away by her Jeevani and her Itihas. Like, and her name is very rarely mentioned, even within Sikh circles, even within those who perhaps claim to understand or know Sikh history. But Rani Sadakaur was one individual who was instrumental in his rise, and also she then led Sikhs into battle under his Raj. When we talk about Sikh Raj expanding under the Sikh Empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, between 1799 and I think she passes eventually in the late 1820s. But that 20-year period, she was at the forefront alongside Akali Phula Singh and others. Hari Singh Nalwa was then coming up as well. But she was instrumental in leading them. And she was one of the most ferocious warriors on the battlefield. But not only was she ferocious on the battlefield, but she was, in terms of strategy and how she would guide Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Again, these are all accounts in our Itihas. So when I read her Itihas, and that was in Punjabi by Gyani Sohn Singh Seetal, he wrote a novel about her in the 1950s. I was genuinely compelled to retell her story in English to a generation that perhaps hasn't even heard of her name. And that's where obviously the novel Rani Sadakaur, Warrior Queen was, that's how that was born. But she was right from the offset. And this is what was remarkable about Rani Sadakaur was, if you know the Missals, at one point there was a lot of kind of conflict between the Missals towards the end of their before Maharaja Ranjit Singh arrives. So she was obviously the head of the Kanhaiya Missal. And the Kanhaiya Missal historically had clashed with various missiles, including the Sukrachakya missile, which was Maharaja Ranjit Singh's missile, his grandfather and his father's. So for her to kind of overlook those differences, and her husband had obviously had become shaheed in one of the battles between the missiles that they were fighting, she overlooked all of that. So this idea we hear, Pantava se me ujara, it's often said today, that we find that at various moments in our Itihas, whenever we look closely. So I think she was an individual who embodied that, because she took Maharaja Ranjit Singh at a young age under her wing. She marries her daughter to him as well, obviously, but she guides him. She literally, when they take over Lahore in 1799, she's riding alongside him. And that's the picture at the front of the novel, into Lahore. So she's there right from the offset. And it's not just Rani Sadakaur, but there are others. The most popular, the most kind of famous one that comes to mind is Mai Pago. But I think to answer your question as to why their actions are overlooked in our history,
right?
is I think we have to remember, like, a lot of the Itihas was written predominantly by men, most times by those who had a certain degree of power and influence. And I think, and we find this in Pant Prakash as well. So Pant Prakash by Ratan Singh Pangu is a hugely influential text. It's the go-to really for that period of Sikh Itihas, in terms of a lot of what we know about the Khalsa in that 18th century comes from Pant Prakash. But in Pant Prakash, you see, and some of your listeners may have to forgive me for this if I offend them, but there is some bias we find, because he was of the Pangi missile, and he doesn't really talk about Maharaja Ranjit Singh a lot. I think he doesn't even mention Rani Sadakaur. So there's a lot of, what I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of bias that we find within the writings, even within our own writings. And that's something, I think that's just human nature, that people will necessarily, like people could say my work is biased because of my understanding or reading on a particular thing, and I'll hold my hands up to it. But I think it's difficult to answer why it's been left out, because when you look at our history, whether it's oral tradition that's been preserved through Katha, Diwara, or even the written accounts, you'll find reference to these extraordinary Bibia, these women in our Itihas. Even going all the way back to Bibi Nanaki, who is obviously
I was just thinking about that. I
Hanji.
was just thinking about.
Yeah, and obviously Sikh tradition holds that they were the first to recognize who the Guru was. So they were essentially the first ever Sikh that we ever had, right? So, and this is where I think the work of Khalis House, if I can speak on that, is we're trying to encourage more works to be written through that lens, a lens which empowers the actions of both men and women in our Itihas, because it's, like I said, it's there right from the offset. And like you
Right.
said, right, in Gurbani there's no distinction. There isn't this idea of like the woman is lower than the man. There's equal importance placed. Equality between male and female is one of the foundations of Gurbani, I guess you could say.